Why are writers so lonely? Because if you go over to your writing desk and start working on the great American novel, it is going to take you thousands of hours and you will be alone for the entirety of it. But people all across the world in many different type of professions, they work lonely jobs, sometimes for 50 to 80 hours a week. But when they are done, they walk back into the world and are extroverted. They like to socialize. But writers are notoriously introverted, notoriously weird, and notoriously susceptible to mental illness. So today, we're going to hear from some famous writers and do some profiles on some of the loneliest writers that ever lived and hear their thoughts on loneliness, because I don't want you to end up in the Kindle graveyard where your mom and your sister buy your book, but nobody else. I want you one day to be on a shelf of some booktuber and have them raving about you. But to get there, you need to see what the greats from the past did, the mistakes they made, the sacrifices they made. So you know what you're going to have to do to walk the walk. And if you guys don't already know, my name is Ian, and on Right Conscious, we talk about the best books and authors of all time. But even better, I help authors like you find shortcuts to help achieve a literary revolution, not just in your own life, but in the lives of others. Because when they read your work, if it is good, their life will be changed forever. And to kick off the show today, we are going to hear from David Foster Wallace on loneliness, because Wallace's famous book, Infinite Jest, is about loneliness. When asked, what is your book about? That's what he would respond with. Quote, I don't know. I was very lonely in college. The stuff in the book that I like and that rings true is that stuff, which was true to me. It was how I felt. The writers I know, there's a certain self-consciousness about them and a critical awareness of themselves and other people that helps their work. But that sort of sensibility makes it very hard to be with people and not sort of be hovering near the ceiling watching what's going on. One of the things you two will discover in the years after you get out of school is that managing to be an alive human being and also to do good work and be as obsessive as you have to be is really tricky. It's not an accident when you see writers either become obsessed with the whole pop stardom thing, or get into drugs and alcohol, or have terrible marriages, or they simply disappear from the whole scene in their 30s or 40s. It's very tricky. So one of the number one attributes for writers is self-consciousness. Wallace just said it, and it's very true. But the great writers do it at a very meta level, because if you are a reader, you are probably pretty self-conscious. Maybe you understand some of the negative attributes that you have and you're doing personal development to maybe overcome those one day. But that is a lot different than writing about it. For instance, maybe you've taken psychedelics before, but if you've ever read a book, or especially beginner authors who are like, I took mushrooms, I'm going to write about it. It's very hard to capture that feeling on paper, because that's a whole other ballgame. Experiencing something and then turning it into a simulacra through language and then making it entertaining and marketable and sellable is really hard. And so that requires a double layer of self-consciousness to be able to achieve that. Because I would encourage you in a social situation to be self-conscious, to be aware. That is kind of the main staple of Eastern philosophy. But have you ever been sold something by someone, maybe a door-to-door salesman, or you have a friend and they're like trying to get you into an MLM scheme, and you feel the switch happen? You're like, oh shit, like this person wants something from me. And that sucks. When you go to a party, and if you're watching a video about lonely writers, maybe you don't go to parties. But if you're talking with a friend or you're a family member, it feels nice when nobody needs anything. You're just jiving and having a good time. But when you need something, or you need something from your boss at work, you get that anxiety. You're like, oh my God. And that's because you've broken away from self-consciousness and are now worried about accomplishing something. But even worse, as a writer, you have to be acutely self-conscious, because you're already smart. If you are writing big books that are going to be great, you're going to be an intelligent human being. But you are also intuiting data. You're also gathering information at all times for this larger work, which is a deep level of needy. If someone walks up to you and they're like, hey, you want to get some pest control in your house? You're like, no. And then they walk away. But if I'm your friend, and I've done this to people before, I'm ashamed to say it, I have strung people along in friendships, maybe even relationships, because I'm like, damn, this person is so crazy. Like, this is great for writing. The stories I'm going to have one day are amazing. This maybe is your wild friend. Like, you keep them around. I don't know about this person, kind of an alcoholic and stuff, but you keep them around. And writers do this all the time. This is why writers usually don't have very good friends. And the ones that settle down and are living this kind of nice life aren't good writers, or at least they're not experimental writers. They're maybe writing mysteries or romance or science fiction or something, like not high science fiction that's like epic, like Dune or something, but just like, writing to market on Kindle science fiction. And even worse, the best place so you can learn from other people, and that happens, but you don't need to, because the greatest well of knowledge for your own writing is yourself and all of your own problems and the different aspects and archetypes of your own consciousness, dualities, contrasts, all those different types of things. So you're constantly self-examining yourself and all your idiosyncrasies, because you can put those into writing. And as you start to read more and understand more, you start to view people as characters. I am a high school teacher. I've been teaching for 6 or 7 years now, and I have seen the same kids come through every single year. The kid has a different name. He looks different. Maybe he's fat this year, but he's the same kid as last year. Same problem, same attitude, yada, yada, yada. And this is the same with humans too. But do you really want to be viewing humans in that way? Or should you be authentically connecting with them? But when you start to understand things too much, like when you go to a movie and you've read so many books, like what's going to happen. It's like, okay, I understand how plot works or how characters work. And so when you understand how humans work, it ruins the fun of it. It ruins that aspect of serendipity. So to make it fun, we can watch, as Wallace says, near the ceiling and understand these things at a different level. And writers are also lonely, and this is the easiest thing that a lot of people just never think about, is that most writers become writers because they suck at speaking. They suck at other mediums of art or communication or business or these types of things. If you are a writer, wouldn't you rather be a musician? Like, I know that may give you anxiety, but if you are a full-time musician that, let's say, is a pro musician and famous or something, or partially famous in your genre, then you get hoes on the road. You get bros on the road if you're a guy or a girl, whatever. There's an instant reaction. You show up somewhere and anyone can understand music. You at a party, even if you play metal music, you can hop on the guitar or do some percussion and you make people laugh. But if you are a postmodernist science fiction author that's into weird sexual stuff and that's what you're writing about, you're not going to probably know anyone who's interested in that. Johnny from Kentucky, who probably fucked his cousin, may be interested in what you're talking about. But the average everyday person or relationship partner, even your wife, husband, whoever, isn't really going to care. And that sucks. But with art, you can show someone a piece of art like, damn, that's crazy. Can you draw something for me? Yeah. With business, look at all this money I have. With athletics, like, look what I can do. Like, there are all these accolades. But with writing, you're dealing with a population that's rapidly declining in intelligence and attention span. And in a market that's slowly dwindling, and with the ChatGPT on the rise, that can maybe even outright you depending on where you're at right now. So it's kind of like, this is really weird. So if you're getting into writing, it's one of the only ways that you should hopefully be able to communicate well, because if you have any other option, get out now, please leave, I beg you. Even me on BookTube, like, I'm not maybe the greatest speaker of all time, but I love talking about books and writing more than anything else. Yoga's up there too. But if I brought this energy and this amount of knowledge and this amount of perseverance to business or some other dumb aspect of YouTube, I could be making a lot more money and not have to work my job, but I would never do that because I care about this. So being a writer means that you should automatically suck at other aspects of communication. You may see me like, damn, Ian's maybe speaking okay on the mic. Go watch my YouTube videos on this channel from 8 or 9 years ago. And so to make things even worse, I just told you guys, okay, so you want to do this. You want to be a writer. Great. God bless you. We fucking need you. People, we need great writing. But I'm sure you don't want to write some book talk bullshit. I'm sure you aspire for something better. And so who are you competing with? You're not competing with the people you went to writing workshops with, or people in your NMFA program or university or your local writing group. You're competing with these guys. And if you want to make your living as a pro author, if you want to show up and be able to buy a house or at least get an apartment or do things like that, not have to work another job, you're going to have to probably be good. You could get really lucky. You could write books to market, and that's a business, that's not really writing, but it's going to be a very long and hard journey if you are trying to do literary fiction, in literary fiction and other genres like fantasy literary fiction, for real. And what that means is that you're going to, every single decision, in your life is going to have to center around writing. When you are out and you're trying to have a good time with your wife or your friends, what you should be thinking in your head if you're trying to get there, because I'm guessing right now you aren't that great, and I'm not either, and that's why I'm doing this, is you're going to have to be hovering like Wallace said. You're going to have to be thinking. You have to always be gathering data for later. And it's brutal. And even more brutal is that you're going to have to probably spend at least a couple hours a day. I mean, we're saying a minimum of 2. If you're not spending 2 hours a day, 365 days a year, you can take a couple days off at your desk. You are never catching up to these guys. Cormac, as I talked about in my video yesterday, Cormac McCarthy and David Foster Wallace had family members who were professors and were good at language from day one. It's like you are competing with, for instance, like the Manning family, They're like our multiple generations of quarterbacks that all went to college. Some went to the NFL. I think most of them went to the NFL. I don't know too much, but they have like that in their blood. They are training from day one. Your family, most likely, was not like that. So first of all, you don't have that childhood gift within you, which is most of the time a lot of it. On top of that, maybe you got the talent dice thrown in, but if you are missing like a big throw of talent and that childhood aspect, you are conservatively 10,000 hours behind, if not 20,000 hours behind your favorite author when they were your age. And so with the declining market, you're going to have to do more to be able to at least do something. And I don't think you should be competing. That's not what this is. I'm actually making a video later on today about that. But the mentality is you're going to have to be in there a lot. And so once again, most of you guys are not rich. I mean, maybe some of you guys are rich, but most of you are working jobs right now, or maybe you're going to college or something. But the time you have to spend 8 hours a day on your writing, or even 3 or 4 hours a day, is probably dwindling. If you have a wife, if you have a family, all these different things, are you going to miss all that? And maybe you are. But what Wallace says is that managing to be an alive human being and also do good work and be as obsessive as you have to be is really tricky. So to be an alive human being means that you have to have a good amount of energy. So I've experienced this with this channel and my writing dreams, and sometimes this, creates problems in my life. So I take my teaching job, I would say, pretty seriously. I try to make the kids I teach better writers by the end of the year. And that's not easy, because to make someone a better writer, you can coach them and teach them some things, but to make someone a better writer, you have to edit their stuff. You have to I have to understand every single year 200 kids' problems and what we need to overcome to reach the next level. And it's all different and it's always fluctuating. There's people who have problems. It's a lot. And so the only way that I can figure out how to build this channel, because I'm trying to create a literary revolution and get my own writing done and my own reading done, and then, spend time with my wife, is wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning. But sometimes that means I only have 5 or 6 hours of sleep at most. And so when I first wake up, I feel pretty good. I get in here and I'm writing and I'm reading. I feel pretty good. I actually do feel alive. But then for the rest of the day, I'm slogging, you guys. I'm at my job and I'm irritated. I'm sleep deprived. Some kid is asking me what do we do? What are we doing again? Even though it's on the board, 8 different places. I've repeated it 10 times. I'm oh my God, I'm going to scream. And then I get home and I'm just want to lay and do nothing. It's no, I got to clean now. I don't keep a messy fucking house like a loser. And so then I'm just slogging through things. And my wife, she wants to talk to me and she wants to talk about her day and stuff you want to in a relationship. That's totally reasonable. And I can barely communicate. I'm yeah, it's great, hon. And then she's do you not care? I'm oh my God, but this is what it takes over the course of years to become great. And I'm kind of doing separate projects. And my goal right now, at least with fiction, I'm not trying to reach with fiction, at least. With poetry, I am, and maybe my nonfiction. I'm not trying to reach the heights. At least not right now. Maybe if I get full time and have some time. But the goal is not to be the next Cormac McCarthy. But the goal is to be really good. And so you guys get what I'm talking about here. Unless you have a lot of time to sit and write, if you've ever written for 6 to 8 hours straight, how did you feel after? You're brain dead. So you're not really going to be alive. And even worse, if you want to be gathering data, if you're going to be doing these things about being obsessive, you're going to be thinking about it all the time. When you're out at the bar, when you're doing these things, you should be thinking about it. That's divergent thinking. That's turning your brain off, and then there's an unconscious idea. You should have maybe a little notebook. I do, to write down ideas all the time. But that's obsessing. It's Jesus Christ. Other people are just floating through life as normies, not really taking things to this level. And so it's not just about maintaining it this year. Maybe you are in this situation. I used to have a little bit more time when I was single, not as many responsibilities. I had a job that I could read and write at. Okay. But as life is going to continue to get more complicated as you continue to get better. You're going to have, even if you publish books, you're going to have payments. You're going to have deadlines. You're going to, most likely, if you're really successful, find people who are going to want to date you, or you're going to go on, there's going to be all these new responsibilities and bigger problems. And that pressure is going to weigh on you. And what Wallace says is that people get obsessed with pop stardom. They want more fame, or they fall into drugs and alcohol like he did. They have terrible marriages like he did. David Foster Wallace was abused women, or even worse, people disappear. I've seen it so many time and time again. I've known so many great writers, you guys, in my 8 years in academia. I was like, damn, like you are fucking good. Like you were talented. You came from a good school, came from a good family. You have everything, but they didn't have the perseverance, and they're gone now. I don't think they're ever coming back. There was a girl I used to know named Catherine, and she was such a good poet. She got published all across the country, all these different types of things. But then when she saw what it was going to take to go all the way, and going all the way in poetry, especially like good poetry, is not rupee car. It's like you're maybe making $80,000 a year. She gave up. And that leads us to the next point, which is all the writers you saw in the thumbnail. Maybe you're new to this channel. You clicked on the thumbnail, like, okay, we're going to talk about all these guys. And on the thumbnail, I put Hemingway, Hunter S. Thompson, Yukio Mishima, and David Foster Wallace. What do all four of those guys have in common? We can have Cormac McCarthy to that list, Frank Herbert, or even Yoshikawa, Baudrillard. Don DeLillo somewhat stays away from this. He hasn't talked enough for me to know. What do all those guys have in common? Oh, yeah, they're all white. Well, Yoshikawa's not white, but most of them are white. They have an insane ego. I'm going to talk probably tonight about Cormac McCarthy talking about why he became a writer. And he said, because I wanted to do other things. I didn't really want to be a writer. I don't really like writing. Writing's kind of at the bottom of my list of things I like to do. But I was talented and really good at writing, and I could never do anything in life that I wasn't the best at. Hemingway, competitive. Mishima, really competitive and weird. Hunter S. Thompson, competitive. David Foster Wallace, super competitive. They all got that dog in them, everybody. Do you have that dog in you? Are you egocentric? Do you believe in yourself at an insane level? And most of the time, the answer is no. I mean, I'm just being honest here. I know a lot of writers. I communicate with a lot of you guys all the time. But when I look at the shelf, even we're talking about female authors too, to get to the top, it's going to take a certain level of narcissism and a certain belief and love of yourself. And the problem with that is that, yes, when you look at David Foster Wallace's life, he was sleeping with all of his students who were 18, 19 years old. When you look at Hemingway, he's socializing around the world. Yukio Mishima is like super popular in Japan, Same with Hunter S. Thompson. But when you have this when you inflate the false self, to use Freudian terms, you become the most lonely person of all because your true self is hidden away in some corner. And when you look at all four of those authors, what they also have in common is they all killed themselves. And we can make excuses why they didn't do it, all the problems, all the trauma. But all four of them have extravagant egos, and all four of them ended up killing themselves. And they were all pretty damn good writers. You know, Hunter S. Thompson, so-so. I mean, he wrote some good stuff. He wasn't on point. He didn't write like as many masterpieces as maybe some of the other ones did. He wasn't as literary, but still wrote some really good stuff. I'll actually be talking about a little bit later Cormac McCarthy's thoughts on Hunter S. Thompson, which were very positive. But I want you to think of the most cocky you've ever been. How did it go for you? Like that time in your life. Most of the time when I look back, yeah, I had some success, Yeah, I was kind of a magnet for in the dating world or these other things. But the rest of my life was a disaster. Like I was managing all these different things when my ego was inflated. I had to have like an ego death eventually because it got out of control. And I can only imagine if that kept going, I would have been a better writer. I was writing at the time and I was writing harder, and I was writing to prove myself, to show people, to walk into that workshop and be like, yeah, fuck you guys, blah, blah, blah. Like I'm the best. Like I wouldn't say that, but that's what I was thinking. And so a lot of these different elements, like having to be self-aware and having an ego, they start multiplying on top of each other. But just having a huge belief in yourself is going to isolate you completely anyway, because most people have no aspirations for their life. People get mad on this channel when I say there's a sea of NPCs out there. But if you can be replaced and your wants and your needs and your aspirations aren't very much different than every other person, we could just replace you with another human. And it's like, all right, yeah, just go into work, live your life, follow the lines. And there's no real creative outlets or these types of things or energy or vividness to your life and your experiences with other people, because art is in everything. But in those two realms, or even in the meditative realm and the inner journey of the soul and that type of things, if you're not really taking that seriously, you haven't really activated your consciousness yet. And so if you have this deep self-belief in yourself, that's actually real too. It's like not like you're like a cocky guy in the street or just like a fucking weirdo who's like, yeah, I'm the fucking best, or they don't do anything. But if you actually believe in something and you're doing something about it, people don't like that. I mean, some people like that, but like a lot of people are very resentful and jealous And that's just further levels of isolation. I'm sure you've maybe experienced this. As I call this the reading parabola. As you start to read books, you start to gain all this knowledge, but you get a parabola is the U-shaped. You at the bottom of the parabola is where you're just completely lonely because you have all this new knowledge, but your family, all your old friends, they don't care about any of this stuff. They don't care about the conspiracies or all the other random stuff that you're maybe into now, and yet you can prove it. They don't like that. So there's a degree of loneliness. There's a degree of separation. And a lot of incels and young men and men of all different ages get caught there forever. And the way out is integrating, understanding, we're all one consciousness, and eventually, connecting with others, even if they're not literary, and seeing them as humans. Even if, I'm saying here, these people are all NPCs, every human does have a unique soul. And if you go deep enough, you can connect with that, and it transcends like all that other kind of base stuff I was just talking about. And Hunter S. Thompson said, "We are all alone, born alone, die alone, and in spite of true romance magazines, we shall all someday look back on our lives and see that, in spite of our company, we were alone the whole way. I do not say lonely, at least, not all of the time, but essentially and finally alone. This is what makes your self-respect so important. And I don't see how you can respect yourself if you must look into the hearts and minds of others for your happiness." And this is a great quote, but this is all in this kind of cycle of resentment that these guys really like. And I would like, right now to offer a different path, a different solution, because here on Right Conscious, I'm not just here to talk about the declining world. Oh, boo-hoo, kids don't care about reading anymore. TikTok this, all writers are lonely. To get great, you're going to have to get all weird and egoic and kill yourself. No, there is a path out. And I discovered this from the famous, the not so famous anymore, but some of the greatest poets of all time, the Chinese wilderness poets, Cold Mountain, Li Po, my favorite poets of all time. Because these were men who were raised most of the time well, sometimes not well, took administration jobs in the Chinese government, had wives, but eventually around the age of 50 years old would retire and then move out to shacks in the wilderness and compose poetry for decades. Some of these guys didn't live that path and were monastic and nomadic their entire life, but they had a different approach to writing. And it started with them killing their ambition because, in my opinion, what makes, for instance, Cormac McCarthy different than a lot of the guys I just said is that he writes way, way better prose in terms of beauty than all those guys, but he kept himself grounded in nature. He never let himself get too lost with ambition. And that's maybe because it took him decades to gain any type of fame, and that he was living without toothpaste, without running water, and bathing in lakes for a decade of his life. That kind of hardship maybe trained him to not be ambitious. But from what I can tell, with true writing, you can use your intellect, hyper-rationality, to maybe write something like An Infinite Jest. But imagine how weirdly in your head you have to be to write something like Infinite Jest. And now we've transitioned to something new in the writing world, because no one cares about your work. And even if your work is great, if no one cares about you, they won't care about your work. It's all a priming effect. And so you're going to have to make people care about your work. And the best way to make people care is to really care about yourself and what you're doing from the heart, and to really pull something from the creative ether. Because if rationality, ambition, competition, it doesn't work well with like meditation and intuition and those types of things. You can follow a program and use your smarty old brain to, like I said, logically write a book. That's fucking great. But at some point, and I shouldn't say that about Infinite Jest, because Wallace wrote this at the lowest point of his life. Wallace published his first novel at 22 years old, The Broom of the System, and it's a damn fine novel at that. How old are you? Imagine publishing your first novel at 22 and getting he got $40,000 back in 1987, which how much is that worth now? A lot. A couple years later, he publishes A Girl with the Curious Hair, gets more money at 24, 25, gets a degree, has this promising future. But eventually his mental illness and his addictions take over and he bottoms out. He ends up in a halfway house working a security job in Boston. And during that time where he had really no money and David Foster Wallace fell off the map is when he started feeling and tapping into the heart, not being ambitious. And later in his life, when he became famous again and started chasing that ambition bug and caring too much, is when a lot of those mental issues that eventually led to his demisal started. That's why he had writer's block for a long time and all these other issues. And so if you can find how to be connected to your heart, how to tap into the creative ether, because if you actually connect to your intuition or the ether, whatever, if you're an atheist, then, whatever. You don't have to believe me about any of this. But if you are pulling information from somewhere, even deep within your own soul or your own mind or whatever, for all the atheists out there, then it's going to serve somebody. It's going to serve something higher. I'm not a Christian, don't worry. I'm not a Muslim, don't worry. I'm not a Jew, don't worry. Not talking about God with the G here, but I'm just saying like something higher, like a bigger purpose here on earth. Like it feels like when I do stuff like this, it feels like that information is needed out in the world. That's why I don't script videos. I got this idea about lonely writers and I just started researching it. It just came to me. I was like, dude, there are so many of you guys out there who are just super lonely right now. And I want to expand on that. So I found that first quote. I actually just found that second quote as I was talking here. No script. I'm just speaking from the heart. Before every video, I meditate for 5 minutes. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to speak. Here we go. And that's what I would attribute to the success or recent success of my channel. I made 200 videos across 4 years and only got 100 subscribers because I was mentally like, people want to hear about this. I'm going to do what the other booktubers want. But eventually I said, you know what? I'm going to talk about whatever I want. I'm just going to go super crazy. And if I find something or think about something, I'm going to talk about it. And when I do that, I get better success. Same in the writing realm. It's just hard to follow that though. That's easy to do. I'm making a video. It'll take me a couple hours to edit, complete, do the thumbnail, yada, yada, yada. But to hold that energy for a novel or a series of 6 novels like Dune, that's fucking hard. And so you need to start training now though, because what if you do blow up? What if one of your books does give you a gateway to the next level? But if you don't have these things in order, if you don't have your room clean, as Jordan Peterson said, and have the defenses up against the neo-Marxists, oh my God, the postmodernists, if you're not ready for the girls with piercings and green hair that want to DM you and ruin your life by taking every sexual ounce of energy away from you, then you're not, you're going to fail. You got to be ready for this, everybody. And these Chinese writers, and the reason I mentioned them was that they were alone, but they weren't alone. None of them were committing suicide. They were connected with nature. They were connected with the Tao. And so the solution is to become more purpose-driven. If you are going to be ambitious, remove the dumb ambition and connect with something else. And that will lead. Don't even worry about being purpose driven. Connect with something else other than yourself, with others, with fulfilling, these intuitive needs that come down to you. And that will lead to purpose. That will lead to aligned people coming into your life, aligned actions, these types of things. Because if you are hyper competitive and lonely and these types of things, it's easy to end up with an addiction, in abusive relationships like David Foster Wallace and many of the other guys I mentioned. It's easy to become a schizophrenic and plan every single aspect of your life and be putting on a show like Mishima. It's easy to become an addict like Hunter S. Thompson and kind of a crotchety, weird old man that's like not really evolving. And it's easy to kill yourself like all 4 of those guys did. And that's not what I want for you. I want you guys to live a happy life. I want you to connect with your family, with your future spouse, with whoever, with your pets if you don't want that, with nature, with God if you are a Christian. Like, great. I want you to do that. But this competitiveness, these types of things, that's going to get into the way. And we're going to talk about this further with Haruki Murakami's analysis of what a novelist mindset should be, like a healthy novelist, because Murakami, I would say, does have a healthy mindset. So that video hopefully is going to be right over here if I remember to put it there. So go ahead and watch that if you want more information on this.